The term white privilege has been co-opted by liberals to create division and actually perpetuates more racism. Now, before you come for me, let me explain. One of the earliest uses of the term white privilege was by a Black American writer, W.E.B. Du Bois. He used this term in the early 20th century to describe a psychological misconception that poor white people held to feel superior to poor black people.
I know you know, but I want to start this off by letting everyone else know that I'm an anarcho-communist. I don't like Democrats or Republicans. And I get where you're coming from. Talking about white privilege can feel divisive, but that's because it forces us to confront some hard truths. That study you mentioned, it didn't show liberals thinking Kevin was better because he was white. What it showed was that people who learned about white privilege recognized that even when white folks are struggling, they still benefit from certain societal advantages that black and brown folks don't get. It's not about having less sympathy for Kevin. It's about understanding that his whiteness still gives him a leg up in a system designed to favor him. That's not superiority, that's awareness. And let me clarify something about W.E.B. Du Bois and white privilege. Du Bois didn't describe it as what you said, psychological misconception for poor white people to feel superior to black people. What he actually wrote in Black Reconstruction in America was the idea of psychological wage. He explained that poor white people, while still economically exploited, were given social privileges like being treated with respect in public, access to certain spaces, and being able to vote. These wages didn't lift them out of poverty, but kept them aligned with wealthy white people rather than uniting them with black people against their shared oppression. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate tool of white supremacy to divide working class people and maintain power. And honestly, ignoring white privilege won't make it go away. It's not just about modern society, it's about history. White supremacy didn't just happen overnight. Over 80% of the world was colonized by white powers. And that legacy of exploitation, violence, stolen wealth didn't vanish when the colonies were quote-unquote freed. In the U.S., think about redlining, segregation, Jim Crow laws. White families were given opportunities to build wealth, land, education, jobs, while black and brown families were systematically excluded. Those ripples are still felt today, and white privilege is the name we give to the cumulative effects of that injustice. Teaching about white privilege isn't about blaming white people. It's about understanding the systems we live in. Has it made society better? Absolutely. The conversations we're having now about policing, housing discrimination, and equity in education would not have happened without awareness of white privilege. Change starts with naming the problem. Are we done? Not even close. But ignoring white privilege won't move us forward. It'll just keep us stuck. I know it can feel like this concept creates division, but what really divides us is the system itself. When we talk about white privilege, we're not saying white people's lives are easy. Far from it. We're saying that whiteness means you're not fighting the added weight of systemic racism on top of everything else. That's a hard truth, but recognizing it is the first step to building a more just world for everyone. You and I both want that, right? Oh, and while we're on the topic of clearing things up, let me address the Willie Lynch letter. It's been deemed a hoax. Historians have analyzed it and concluded it's not an authentic 18th century document. The language and writing style don't match the time period, and there's no historical record of such a speech being delivered. That doesn't mean the ideas in it about dividing and controlling oppressed people are not valid critiques of white supremacy. It's just the letter itself isn't historically accurate. It's important to stick to the facts, especially when you're talking about systems of oppression.